Hi, I'm John and welcome back to my Lair of Action Figures, where I'll be talking and reviewing action figures from different manufacturers. Today's going to be a bit of a different video because we're going to be more talking about Super7 as a company and a general, the products, a bit the history of Super7, what do I think about the products. I will be doing a more review detail of the figures, but this is a general feeling about this company, and the big question that is going to be asked is, are these guys a bit of a kind of a scammer? I would use as a word, but you will understand better when I will be getting in forward into the video. I hope you will enjoy it, and let's dive into Super7. Now, like I said, let's talk about Super7. So, Super7 was founded in 2001 in San Francisco. Brian Flynn is the owner of this company. Now, he is a fan of Japanese vintage toys. He likes horror movies, science fiction figures, and most of the figures that came out were more under the wave of like these ones who are from the Reaction series line, and they were basically 5 points of articulation, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 over here. So these are the points that were made, and those figures were found at Toys R Us, other retailers in the US, and they were also a bit shipped worldwide. So of course at that time I was not at all interested in them. I did not try to contact them or even knew about their existence, and again I was more specialized in 1/6 scale because I was a distributor for Hot Toys, Sideshow, DID, Dragon models, so that was more my main focus. Of course I did have Plan B Toys who were 6-inch figures, but this kind of figures did not really interest me right to the moment that they decided to go and do some G.I. Joes. But of course, like I said, they were mostly specialized in other forms of figures that did not sell, even if I may be a fan of Metallica or other groups that they might have done in figures who might have been interested. Then afterwards we also have the Ultimate 7, who are the 7-inch figures that they started making. The only moment I took interest in Super7 was the moment that they started doing some G.I. Joe figures. Now let's talk about the different figures, and let's have a look at all the different figures that they have made and what are my thoughts about it. Now, let's start by the beginning. As you can see, we're going to be talking about this guy over here. So this is these 5-point articulation figures who were the first ones that came out, and the only interest why did I pick up all the sailors was because I wanted them to be used with my aircraft carrier. Now, I'm not a fan of these 5-point articulations. I think they were good back in the 80s when I had them as a regular figure from the Action Force line, or even the kind of Star Wars figures that kind of worked, but I would have preferred, but they would go pretty well on the USS Flag, having them running around with the maintenance, maybe not with the laser rifle, because I do find it a bit ridiculous, but this is mostly inspired by the cartoons. So this is what they've been doing, and as you can see, a lot of these figures over here are cartoon inspired. Bazooka with a more wintry coat. This was from the cartoon where Quick Quick was introduced. So they really did a lot of stuff around the cartoons. Now, if I can say, I would say that they did a pretty good job. If you're a fan of the cartoons, they have some pretty good ideas behind what they do, and I do think that there's some good ideas behind it. Now, the thing is, you have to understand, this is sold for $20. Now, of course, when I was talking about this guy over here, if we can put, so you will have to make this figure, you're going to be needing, so there's going to be one mold for this, one mold for this, one mold for this. That means we're already at 4. The torso might be molded in 2 different parts. So that would mean you will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 for the head sculpt. So you have 7 molds to make for these figures, and the suggested retail price was $20. Now, of course, you can see that they have different paintings. You have African American, you have Caucasians, but if you look closely at the head sculpt, the only thing who changes is the paint. the head sculpts are the same. So if you take over here, they made them a blonde, they made them a brown. But if you look closer, the figures have the same thing. Same thing of this mustache. These are exactly the same head sculpts. So you can see that they really went on to reusing a lot of the same bits and pieces to create their figures. So of course they did a lot of repaints and other stuff. But like I said, not interested at all. Most of these figures went in clearance and were pushed out as a fact of not selling that well, and were put into the clearance bin. That's when I purchased them. I got those from Toys R Us Canada, and instead of paying them $25 Canadian plus taxes, I paid them like $10 a piece. So at that price, I would say that was more the price that I would be willing to pay for them. Now, of course, afterwards I decided to do the Ultimate G.I. Joe figures, who are over here. And these Ultimate G.I. Joe figures have more interesting aspect to them, if we can say it like that. The reason I find these figures pretty interesting, it's that they have a cartoonish look on it. You know from my reviews that I'm not a big fan of the cartoon, but I do think that it's pretty interesting having these figures. And like I said, they seem to be really focusing and really liking the cartoons because they made a lot of stuff around it. Now, for me, there is a big problem with these figures. Of course, the size is a bit silly because due to the fact that if you would compare them to a classified figure, they are a lot smaller, and this makes it a bit of a shame because it is not possible to reuse them. This is something that is a big problem when you have different scales. These things don't work. But the goal I was having was to use these figures as on a shelf when I would be building up my Lair of Action Figures. I'll be doing a video explaining more about it, but I wanted to put them up with the fist in there. Anybody who saw the cartoon, I'm going to put a picture up on the right hand side, will see this is what I wanted to recreate as a picture with all these different G.I. Joe figures that they came out with. So now that we've talked a bit about this, let's talk about the quality of the products, what do I think about them, and where's the line going from there. So that we have gotten this out, let's talk a bit about some of the projects and some of the failures around this company and where I think that they're going. Now, if you remember that our great friends at super7 decided to launch a crowd-funded product, who was the Cobra flying mothership from the cartoon, the one who blows up. And that was went into production, or would have gone into production, if you would have recently got 4,000 people back in the project. Now, there was 2 tiers to unlock with some extra accessories. I find those accessories pretty stupid. And if you wanted to unlock everything, you needed 6,000 people to order. Now, this like the mothership in the cartoon, crashed and burned because there was only 1,661 people who backed the project before it was cancelled. Now, it's something that was very interesting at that time. They announced that they were going to make O-Wing figures, like the original G.I. Joe figures that came back between 1982 to 1994. So, of course, that got a lot of collectors who really loved the O-Wings figures really hyped up and wanted to have a bit more looks at it. So that they decided to do those figures. Now, this is where I'm coming to a part where I believe that super7 is ripping off the collector and has a big problem with business on the way of doing it. Now, personally, as a shop, as a collector, as a distributor, the way I see a product, you need to be selling a product for a certain price, and you can justify a certain price because of the year that the product comes out. So you cannot really compare a product that came out in the 1980s with what's the selling price of something in 2020, let's say. So of course, $20 seemed a bit expensive, like I said. For these guys over here, you have like only 7 parts of molded figures. But then they said, we're going to make these figures. Now, they launched the figures. They kind of sell out very fast, but there's an explanation behind the reason why they sold out so fast. So I'll be getting into that a bit later on. But what they did, they said, we're going to come out with an articulated figure, with all the articulations, with everything, swiveled arm, all of this, and the suggested retail price is also $20. There's no way in 2024, 2025 that you can make a figure who has so many points of articulation the same price as this as today. This figure should be more expensive. Even back in the day, I don't remember exactly because that was over 40 years ago, but even the Action Force figures I was buying, the 5-point articulation ones and the ones who were based on the G.I. Joe ones, there was already a difference of maybe £1 or £2. So back in the days, the pound was worth something, and today it's not really worth as much. But if we dive into the production of the figure, who's going to be more of a manufacturer, let me see. Oops, so we cannot get a good thing. But if you look at the G.I. Joe figure itself, you're going to need a lot of molds. So for the legs, you're going to need 3 parts to mold the legs. For the arms, you need 5 parts. For the torso, you need 2. So that's exactly the same with it. Over here, you need 1 piece. And for the head, you're going to need 1 piece also. Now, of course, you could say that there's a little metal hook in here who holds the O-wing. You would have the O-wing. Then on the arms, you have 1 metal part here, 1 metal part here. So that's 4 extra ones. And you're going to have 3 screws, 1 on this leg, 1 on this leg, and 1 behind the figure over here, who's over here to hold the figure together. So as you can see, this brings it up to 13, 14 pieces of however you want to put it. So you cannot tell me today that you're going to be building up a figure who has so many molds, different parts. For now, they cannot reuse them. They haven't built up any army building figures right now, and they're not doing that much. So all of the new molds that they have to do is a lot more. So this figure costs a lot more to produce. So if you're selling me this for $20 and this for $20, you're ripping me off on this one. There's no other way to say it. You're just ripping me off, and this is wherefore I believe it's a scam. Now that we have talked about these guys, let's jump into the Ultimate figures. Now let's talk about Ultimate 7 figures over here. So the first ones who came out that I got for the 3 first waves, if I'm not mistaken, we had a little protection around it, and you would have the figure coming out like this. Now on the newer versions who are behind, I just got them in clearance because I'm not paying $55 for these things. They're not worth it at all. Sorry, spoiler for that part. They do not have any more of their covers on it, and they should remove this. So this means that the figures are going down. Also, one of the things that was a bit surprising, I think the quality went down as we go along with these figures, because when I'm looking at the Storm Shadow figure over here, when I'll be doing a review, but you would see the paint is already peeling off. It's not really well applied, and there's a lot of issues over here. Now, there's another issue that I find who's kind of incredible for figures who are sold $55. We took Stalker and we take Gung Ho, who's over there. The hats are not removable, or the beret is not removable on the figure over here. Now, something was really strange. They came out with Flint. I don't have him exposed over here, but Flint beret comes off. So you're telling me that for $55, you're not capable in 2020 to be able to make removable hats on them when they are perfectly removable on 6-inch figures from the G.I. Joe classified line, or even the 25th anniversary lines have better removable items than these guys over here. So this is something that I do not understand. Now, there's a bit of a bad news. I don't believe that Super 7 is going to be continuing with the Ultimate line. Now, they wanted to release line 6, and those were going to be 3 repaints. So I'm going to put the picture up in the corner here on the right, and this was Scarlet, Baroness, and Lady J repainted. The line didn't even go out because the pre-orders were so bad on these figures that nobody wanted them. And all of these figures over here, most of the last ones, the 2 last waves that came out are not going so much in clearance because people don't believe in the product and didn't overstock on the product. And this is the reason why I believe the line is dying and will not be produced. Anyway, if you look, Toy Fair of New York just passed. They only announced the ones with the O-wings and a few other products, but the G.I. Joe Ultimate 7 have totally disappeared. It was a bit of a shame. I would have liked to get some of the other figures who are missing to build up, like in the generic of the cartoon, but these figures are not coming out. I will be diving into more of the reviews on these figures, but I mean, even over here, if you take the paint on the head over here was coming off. So, I mean, this is really pretty bad as a system. And like I said, for $55, this is not acceptable that the paint comes peeling off like this. The ideas are good behind the figures. They had some interesting ideas, but sorry, the quality was not there. And I think this is something who's really a shame on it. So this is why I believe that these figures are not going to come out anymore. So, what are my final thoughts about Super 7 as a company? As I said, I strongly believe that we got ripped off with the 5-point articulation figures. Like I said, there's no way that you need so much more parts, and we all know that the molds are what costs the most, or if you didn't, that's what is the most expensive, is the molds. Then having to reuse them puts it as a situation who is really calling out of a whip-off, and a company that whips off its clients or collectors is not somebody that I want to support nor buy the products from. Now, if we're talking about the Ultimate 7 figures, there was many problems, the issues with the articulation, the fact that you don't have a double jointed elbow. That means you can only bring up the elbow right to here, so holding a rifle or putting him in a firing position makes it totally impossible. And also the problem with the paint makes it really horrible. And like I said, most of those figures, and I did buy some of the first waves, I didn't buy the other waves, I got them off Amazon or any other places where they were clearing them off. I mean, even if you go to BBTS, who's Big Bad Toys store, most of these figures are in clearance, and they're selling them for nearly 50%. So they're not making any money on them, because I presume that they're getting them from the same place I got my waves from, and there's no way that they're making money. They're losing money on them. So that's going to be it for this. I'm very disappointed, and I think that it's a bit of a shame, because if we take the positive points about it, they have some good ideas. But sadly, if we're going to get ripped off, I prefer Hasbro taking the line over and giving us some 3¾ inch figures, because they're doing it with their Transformers versus G.I. Joe or ex G.I. Joe. So we do know that they have the possibility to make some O-wing figures, and maybe they should be taking it back and leaving Super 7 continue their science fiction movie stuff and other things. But sadly, I think they lost the point for me, and that's why I'm not buying any of the O-wing figures that they made. Even if I was interested at the beginning with the twin brothers, that was a BBTS exclusive, who was also sold by Super 7, but I cannot support a company that does not respect their clients. So that's going to be it for my thoughts and what I believe about Super 7. If you like this kind of video, please leave a like, share, comment in the section. If you have any suggestions, please leave them also. Subscribe to the channel, that helps a lot. You can go and check out my Facebook page, my Instagram page, where you can see plenty of pictures that I have done of the figures, the behind the scenes, the teas, or even pictures outside. Until then, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!